I've got to remember this before I start. Good morning, everybody. Good morning indeed. This is not a late night show as I normally would put out, because my guest is a returning guest, and he's a very, very big favourite of mine, Martin Bailey from Tokyo. Martin, welcome to my show.
Thanks a lot, Paul. It's a pleasure to be here. That's for a second time.
Yeah, second time indeed. And this time I've got the camera so that it switches. It's not solely on you. It's one of the big mistakes I made. Firstly, a big thank you to you, because you're the guy that inspired me to get this show started up and running. When we had a brief conversation on Google, and I said, what shall I do? And you said, go for it. So I've gone for it. And this is show number 60, I believe. So I'm going well, enjoying it greatly and immensely.
Yeah. Well, Martin, not at all. I'm glad you're doing it.
Yeah, thank you. I've been able to talk to so many people around the world in photography terms. It's absolutely superb. So, and getting some good reviews back as well. So thank you very much indeed. Let's get started straight off. The main reason I called you was about the Canon 5 DSR, which we're going to get to in detail at the back end of the show. But another interest of mine was when I was looking around eBay for a medium format camera, thinking about doing some medium format work, and then all of a sudden, boom, up pops Martin Bailey. He's gone and bought himself a Yashica medium format camera, and he's going to start doing some film photography. Martin, why? Let's start off. Why the Yashica? Okay,
so there's a number of reasons why I ended up with this. I'll hold it up for
great, thank you.
So there was honestly the first reason that I bought this was we went to a flea market. We live next to a cycle racing stadium here in Tokyo, and they had a flea market on one weekend. And as I was walking around, I thought, you know what, I'd love an old twin lens reflex camera just to take photos of. I didn't want to take photos with it. I wanted something just to use as props, and to just because they look great. And as I was looking around, there were some for like $40, but they obviously, you could see from them, they didn't work. They were, and yeah, so I thought, well, do I really want to pay $40, $50 for something that I can't really put a film in? And initially that was going to be fine because it was only going to be a prop. But then I walked around this corner, and there was a guy with a huge crowd around his stall, and he was claiming that all of the cameras he was selling actually worked. And I thought, well, wow, you know, if I could actually get one of these things that I can put a film in and shoot with as well, obviously I can still use it as a prop. It's more authentic to me because it actually works. But I thought, well, you know, I used to shoot film for years, but I never had the opportunity to actually process my own. And I thought, okay, if I'm going to process film, I don't want to be messing around with 35mm. I've scanned 35mm film. I know the quality. I thought if I could get myself a medium format film camera, then that would be worth actually investing a bit of money and time into figuring out the processing side. So, I mean, this thing cost me, I think it was about $140, maybe more than I would pay for it in some countries. I could probably have got one cheaper in the city as well, but it was a little bit of an impulse buy. I didn't haggle with the guy. I just thought, you know what? I don't really care. Threw the money and got the camera. And I came home, and I spent a few evenings figuring out what I needed to actually process a film. I ordered a couple of rolls of the film. I'm actually...
Yeah, I was going to ask you, what film are you basically using?
I started off with a couple of rolls of Ilford HP5. This is ISO 400, and I didn't order these. I bought the first two rolls in the city. I took the camera in and actually loaded the first roll in the photo store, in the film store, and that was a bit of a mistake because I knew what I was looking for. I needed to wait for these arrows to come along to show me where to align it, and I asked the guy. I said, "Do you know if this film has the arrows?" Because I didn't know. And he said, "I'm not sure." He said, I'm not, I can't answer that. So I said, okay, well, I kept winding a little bit further. Nothing appeared. So I closed the back of the camera and started to expose the photos. It turns out that I did need to wait for I've got it. Are you okay for me to spend a few minutes to actually show you this?
Yeah, sure. Go ahead. Because I know you've done a blog on this and you've done a little presentation, but it's worth noting for anyone interested in this form.
Yeah, so I mean this is what I needed to wait for this arrow that I'm showing you now. You know, this is the roll. You put it in the back of the camera. You start to advance it, and you have to wait for this arrow to align with two arrows in the back of the camera. And I knew that. I'd read the manual, but I didn't know that it was a standard thing on all films. So I thought, you know what, I'm just going to keep going. But the thing is that for the first while with these films, it's just paper. There's no film there, you know, because you'd be wasting film. So it's like a leading paper that goes in. And so you have to wait for this, because unless you do that, all you're doing is you're exposing paper and not film. So I got the first roll, messed up, lost the first 3 frames because I was exposing them over paper. But I also bought some. As I looked into this, I bought some. It's all Ilford. I used to love Ilford film in my film days before. So I switched from HP5 to Delta. And I got myself some 100, some 400. There we go. Some 400 and some 3200. Because and this is all 120 film. So it's basically 6 centimeters by 6 centimeters square. But yeah, that's the film I've been using. And that's really how I got the camera and got started.
3200 setting there, grain like golf balls by the sound of things.
I'm sure it is. Yeah. I haven't actually exposed one yet.
No, okay. So but this is interesting because you got the film and you've gone through. What was your first processing done? Was that done by the shop, or did you in actual fact go straight in and dived into it yourself, processing the film yourself?
Yeah, the reason that I wanted to buy this, I mean, in addition to buying it as a prop, the reason I decided to go this route was just because I wanted to experience actually processing my own film. So there was a series of 4 podcasts that I did, all video podcasts, and they were literally showing you my very first experience in. I filmed me learning how to do it. Thankfully, it wasn't at the end me going, "Oh well, that was a flop." It was me with actual photos. It worked, but it took me about 3 evenings to figure out what I needed to do. I ended up creating like a cheat sheet with all of the instructions for myself. This is all wrinkled up because it got wet during the process, but I created myself a cheat sheet with all of the timing and everything, and I documented it all. I walked the viewers through my first experience in developing my own film. And so, I mean, it's all there on the blog if anyone wants to look at it. But yeah, I didn't get anyone to actually to develop it for me. I just did the first roll myself. I haven't actually shot a second roll yet. I need to get out and do some more.
To get out there. Now, what's the basis? Are you going to use this camera handheld, or are you going to fix it to a tripod and go that route?
I actually, for a number of shots I did, there's a tripod thread on the bottom here. And what I did was I put a really right stuff plate on it, and I just put it on the same tripod that I used for my 5D. I was out, did a number of photos while I was out doing some images of the 5-color lakes in Fukushima. I spent a day up there while I was visiting my wife's dad. So yeah, but I took this as well and just kept putting it on the tripod. Did a lot of handheld as well. I was photographing I was using the ISO 400, so I had reasonably steady, fast shutter speeds. But that for me was all relearning, because I mean I expose to the right in digital. I make sure that all of my highlights are on the right side of the histogram. But of course, with film, if you do that, you're going to overexpose it slightly. Yeah. And so I was consciously trying to, I took a meter with me, but I didn't use it because I was photographing all of the scenes with my digital SLR anyway. So I was getting the meter readings from the camera, from my SLR, and I was just reducing them by about 2/3 to a stop and dialing the you know, because you actually on the side here,
Yeah.
you've got the dials where you've got the so which one is it? Oh yeah, so here we've got the focus on the side here, and then on the front there's two wheels that you do the shutter speed. I think it's the shutter speed. I'd need to check again. I'm forgetting. And I'm getting old, so I have to look under my glasses now. Yeah, you adjust the aperture and the shutter speed here, so it's just all there. You know, you wiggle them around. Obviously, you're looking down into the camera, so
and it's a reversed image,
right? So I'm not sure if you can see this, but
yeah, I can just see your ceiling. Yeah,
yeah. So we've got the you look down there. You can actually use it in such a way you've got a loop here, so
magnifies
the ground glass, and you can also there is a way, which how do I do it? Oh yeah, so you can also send this down, and you can use this on the back. There's a square here, and you can actually use it directly so that you're looking through at the scene, so that you're not actually looking through the, you know, they say that if in the manual it says if you're doing sports or things that are fast paced, you can't, you know, instinctively you want to go the other way. If it's tilted one way, you tilt that way, and it moves further the other way. And so because it's all upside down, if you've got to do something really fast paced, it's actually better to look through the this hole at the back here, and this is basically your frame. So I mean, but they thought of a lot of things with this. I mean, I'm amazed. I am amazed at the engineering. I mean, this camera's almost it's either a couple of years older than me or a couple of years younger than me, but it just works still. I mean, it's all of the engineering that went into this. You know, almost 50 years on.
It's amazing.
Still going away.
Yeah, and it's quality built. It's, you know, Yashica were well known for that twin lens reflex. I know you had Rolleiflex and the other type of models, but Yashica made good cameras, didn't they? And it's good to see that it's lasted that time.
This is in the era. You know, if we remember. I mean, Japan was post-war Japan. They were still in the phase of copying other countries. Yeah. To figure out how to you know, build an industry, and cameras was one of them. And they, you know, so they were basically copying the Rollies, and they, you know, but I mean, I can go into town and buy a secondhand Rollie about the same age, and it'll cost about 10 times more. Yeah, you know, so I mean, I'd love one, but obviously, for me, this part of my photography, it's just a hobby. It's not something that I really want to. I'm not converting to film or anything like that.
No, this is what I wanted to ask you actually, and I assume the way you were presenting your podcast there, and the way you'd written about it, that it effectively, which is a nice thing. It's great to have a hobby within your business, and you're using the camera for that. Can I just ask you about your workflow? So you process the film. What's the next stage on from there, Martin?
I actually have been scanning. I just scanned in the film, and I ended up with, I mean, again, I did a podcast on this with all of the details, but I scanned the images at 4,200 DPI, which is about the limit that you can scan film at. A lot of people say 3,200 or so, but I wanted a nice big file, and I did a number of different checks with my scanner. It's an Epson scanner. I did a number of tests, and I found that after 4,200, things just got softer, bigger files, but no more detail. And below that, I didn't get quite as much detail. So I did a number of different tests, and I found that 4,200 was about the limit that I could go to. And that gave me, I think there were around 70 megapixel files. Honestly, the detail in these files, after shooting with even a 22 megapixel DSLR, the detail in the film was, you know, there's a lot of grain in there. It's very organic, but that's kind of the beauty of film, right? I mean, it's one of the nice things about it. And so, I mean, I printed out a few of them. I printed them on Breathing Colors Vibrance Metallic, which is, it's almost like a daguerreotype sort of paper. It's a metallic gloss, beautiful paper. So I didn't print them out huge, but you know, with 70 megapixels, I could probably print them out at 24 by 24 inches, and you know, like basically 2 foot square, and still get a really, really good quality file. But honestly, I mean, the photos that I've shot, it's, for me, they really are just, it's me playing with the system. And I'm not really thinking of the resulting photos as anything that special at the moment. I will probably, one thing I want to do with this, I mean, I'm not a big portrait photographer, but I would love to do just a series of portraits with this film camera, just to get, you know, probably use the lens aperture wide open, as shallow depth of field as I can, and just do some head and shoulder portraits with it. I'm trying to think of how and where I would do that. But there are projects that I've got in mind for it. But the first roll that I did was really just about me getting through a roll so that I could process it. That was one of the main goals.
Like an experimentation through with camera, just learning how it works and stuff like that. That's important. Actually, in fact, whatever camera you get, it's important to just sort of, excuse me, just get out there and use it. Yeah. When you actually bring the file into your workflow on Lightroom, assuming you use Lightroom, how much work are you actually doing with the image there? Are you what sort of adjustments are you having to make to the image?
I actually found I tried two things. The only thing the thing that I was most concerned about was just sharpening the image without introducing any more grain. I tried doing the sharpening in Photoshop, not in Lightroom. I went into Photoshop and used Smart Sharpen, and I actually found that the unsharp mask in the printer, in the scanner software, did a slightly better job because it knows exactly what it's bringing in. You've set it all up. It's all done in the same process, and so I found that as far as actually processing the image, it was pretty much done when the file was saved to a TIFF. But then, of course, I've had to go in and, you know, there'll be the odd mark, that something that was maybe on the film, either a flaw in the film or something that got in there, maybe a bit of dust in the camera. But yeah, I just went in and in Lightroom did a little bit of dust removal with just hit the Q key and spot removal. And that was really all I did. A little bit of cloning of some of them where I'd got a few things sneaking in the edge of the frame, which is fine. I knew that they were there. I just wanted to get a certain type of framing, and I removed that. But it was really just all done in Lightroom. Yeah.
Just remind me what the lens is on that on the Yashica there, Martin.
It's I believe it's an 85. Again, I'm gonna look under my glasses.
Yeah. The thing is, of course, it's an 80mm on medium format. So what equivalent is that in 35mm?
I think it's about 50 millimeters.
About 50 mil, yeah. I'm trying to remember back my conversation. I had a great conversation with Michael Kenner about this, and he was giving all these figures, and then he said, "No, hold on a minute." He said, "That's not for you guys at 35 mil." And then of course I'm saying, "Well, hold on a minute. I've got to go back to 1.5 crop." We got totally confused about it. So
I need to go back and double check just to make sure. When I looked, I was thinking it was about that.
I think you're right. I think the 80mm is effectively the standard, and no doubt we'll get emailed about this and told, "No, you're wrong." All that sort of stuff coming through, no doubt. Well, the reason I asked that was, though, could you see yourself using this on one of your workshops?
Probably not. I might take it with me on private trips, like personal shooting trips, but on my workshops, I generally need to be as free as possible to help the participants with their photography. And I find that if I'm messing about with other stuff, because here's the thing, I'm still a quality freak, and I know that if I'm going to be shooting with this, it will be okay, get the shot with the 5D and then do another shot with this. So I'll be doubling up on all of my effort. Plus there's film to change, there's film to look after. I think that while I'm with paying customers, I will probably not take this unless at some point, you know, if I continue to shoot with this, if someone wants to actually learn how to use a TLR camera from me, then I would, you know, once I get to the point where I'm really confident to talk about it, I might do a workshop with this. But if that was the case, this would be the only camera that I take. I wouldn't take another camera. So for me, it's really about staying nimble so that I'm able to help my participants as much as they need.
Yeah, and of course, you're doing your workshops. It's not about you going out to take photographs. It's about basically you're paying customers, as you said, to teach them through, as to advise them with regards to the type of image that is available for them, what they can concentrate on, the like, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. That's great. Now, just one final thing I wanted to ask you was the paper you mentioned again was. Could you remind us of that, please, Martin?
That was the Breathing Colors Vibrance Metallic.
Metallic, that's right. Yeah,
it's a beautiful media.
Yeah. Just at this point in passing, all the links basically to Martin's podcast with regards to his development, can I use that term, with the Yashica, I'll be posting in my blog after the show. And I think what I'd like to now turn the discussion to, Martin, is your new toy. Which you mentioned to me, you reckon that you're probably one of the first in Japan that placed the order for this camera, and it's the Canon 5DSR. Here it is.
Yeah, so the 5DSR. This is actually my second one. The one that's in my cabinet behind me is the first one, and I was sitting on the bus I think it was the last morning of our Winter Wonderland workshop, the second Winter Wonderland workshop we did this year in Hokkaido, Japan. And I knew that the announcement was going to be made. It had already been released in the US, and I was on the phone to my local camera store, Map Camera, here in Tokyo, where I order all of my stuff. And I'm saying, I want to order a 5DSR. And they're saying it hasn't been announced yet. I said, it has in America. It's been announced. I said, sorry, we've got to wait for the Japan Canon website to be updated. So I'm sitting there with my iPhone, like, reload. Okay, wait, I can probably wait another 5 seconds. Yeah, okay, reload. And I just kept reloading. And the moment it came up on the Canon website, I was back on the phone to Map Camera within seconds. And so I think I'm probably the first person to actually get a camera
order this one, yeah.
The camera. Of course, I had to wait for it just like everyone else. Sure. But it turns out that, you know, I mean, we can talk about more about this, but I just fell in love with the quality. You know, being able to shoot at 50 megapixels, and you can handhold with it. It's, you know, everyone was saying, you know, because I've heard a lot of people saying about the D800. And the D810 that you can't really handhold with it because it's such high resolution. I'm not sure if that's a technique thing or what it is, but that's just not the case with this. You can handhold. You have to keep your shutter speed relatively fast, but not anything over the top. And I just, you know, the first thing I did, I took maybe 6 frames. I was just in the street outside the camera store, and I zoomed in, and I'd already gone through and set up a few things in the camera, and I'd set up I'd set it up to magnify to 1:1, so pixel for pixel on the back of the LCD on the back, and I hit the button, the magnify button, and I was so close into the scene that initially I couldn't even see which part of the scene, because I was shooting with an 11 to 24 millimeter lens. I couldn't even tell which part of the scene I was looking at. It was that big on the LCD, but it turns out I was looking at writing on a restaurant window, and it was just crystal clear. And this is handheld. And I just thought, oh my God, this is, you know, the hair on the back of my head stood up. But I spent that afternoon testing it, did an initial impressions review straight away. And then I spent 3 days up in the mountains with the snow monkeys, the snowless monkeys, because it's summertime. Yeah. And I did some landscape work, and it's just totally blew me away. I got home and I thought, okay, well, now because I wanted to keep the 5D Mark III so that I could do some side-by-side comparisons. I thought I've done those tests. I don't need the 5D Mark III anymore. My initial plan was to keep the 5D Mark III as my backup camera, but I thought, you know what? If I'm in Iceland, or I'm in Namibia in 2 weeks' time. I'm in Iceland in September, and I thought, if I literally am in Namibia or Iceland, and the 5DSR breaks, and I have to use the backup body, I can't go back to 22 megapixels. I thought, you know, and I know that this sounds stupid, because 22 megapixels has been fine for years.
Yeah.
But there's so much detail in there now. I thought, you know what, I just can't do it. And I'd already sort of fallen out of love with my 1DX, because the 7D Mark III was so much, you know, cheaper, but also in a number of ways better than the 1DX. So I thought, okay, it's going to happen. So I took my 1DX and my 5D Mark III to Map Camera again in Shinjuku. They actually gave me about $1,200 in cash above and beyond what it cost to buy the second 5DSR and a battery grip. So I sold 2 cameras and got 1 and a bit of cash as well. But it means that, you know, now I can travel with 2 5DSRs, and I don't have to worry too much about going to the backup if necessary.
Yeah. I do remember, correct me if I'm wrong here, you were involved in a TWIP conversation with Frederick and a couple of other guests, and you were talking about sensors and sensor sizes. And it must have been after Nikon had brought out probably their 750 or their 800 or maybe the 810. And I remember you saying that you were aware of a sensor in the Canon factory of around about 50 megapixels. So it was
120 megapixels.
Wow. I didn't know it was that big.
Yeah. So this is actually public knowledge, but I went to Canon's HQ a few years ago, and on their campus, they've got a private museum that it's not something that's open to the public, but they take guests in there. And they took me in there, and I saw this, you know, over on the side in a glass cabinet. They've got this sensor. It's just a sensor on a plate. And I mean, there's something written above that says what it is. But I looked at it, and you know, normally when you look at a sensor, you can see the tiny grid of pixels. It's smooth. The pixels are so small, it's like almost smooth. And then I looked at the sign, and I'm saying, oh, okay, this is the one that I think it had been a couple of years before that they'd talked publicly about the fact that they'd made a 120 megapixel camera just as a proof of concept, and it's in their museum. But yeah, I mean, you know, I watched cameras out resolve lenses 10 years ago. My first white lens, which I started to do my Hokkaido trips with way back 10 years, more than 10 years ago now, was the original 100 to 400. And it worked fine at 6 megapixels. It worked fine at 8 megapixels. But at 12 megapixels on the 5D, the original 5D, it started to break down. It was starting to feel the resolution. And then at 20 megapixels or 21 with the 5D Mark II, it fell apart. And so basically, I mean, I know that lenses can be out resolved by the cameras, but I've so far with this, you know, with the 5DS, I mean, I've got, thankfully, I'm in a position where I'm able to set myself up with some of the best quality Canon glass. I've got, you know, everything I've got is the latest version. I've got the 100 to 400, the new version, the Mark II. I've got the new 11 to 24. And I've got the Mark II 70 to 200, which was actually starting to show its age a little bit at 22 megapixels. But with the 5DS, it's sharp as tacks. And so even lenses that I was starting to fall out of love with a little bit are fine with this camera. And so I don't know if it really was out resolving, you know, because what they've done is they've put a new, I believe it's a belt driven shutter action in the 5DS. It's rather than it's just being springs and just slapping it around in there, the shutter is actually much smoother. I mean, if I turn this on and shoot a few frames for you to hear it, let me just see if I can. So,
yeah,
I don't know if you can hear that. The actual,
it's a lot quieter than other Canons I've heard.
Yeah, I mean, it's. I'll just crank up the ISO. The shutter action is actually very quiet, and the reason for that is because they've built a new shutter mechanism, so that it reduces the slapping around and the vibration that is that comes about from that. So I don't know if it really was out resolving. It could be that the older lenses were just, the older cameras, they were shaking around too much to actually,
I just read. I took a little print of actually because I wanted to read the blurb on as regards to the camera, and there's something here. It says 50.6 megapixel CMOS sensor with a low pass cancellation filter. Was that present in the other with the 5D Mark III?
Well, no. What it is the R in the 5D SR is I believe for resolution, and what it is they've cancelled the effect of the low pass filter. So the 5DS has the low pass filter enabled, but with the 5D SR, they've actually just cancelled it. It's just like the D800 was. There was two versions of that as well, right?
Yeah, that's right.
So it's the same thing.
Right.
The downside of that is that you can get a little bit of Moire, M-O-I-R-E, Moire effect, and that is, that's a risk you take if you buy the R. But the fact that they don't, because basically, I mean, I know that this is pretty much common knowledge, but basically what these low pass filters do is with every digital imaging system, the light that comes in through the lens, if you just take the data from each pixel, you can get this pattern. If you're photographing like, say, a shirt with like lots of fine patterns on there, you've probably seen it on TV where, you get like the grid of the pixels with the grid of a texture starts to get this weird sort of zigzags and shapes and patterns in there. And so to overcome that, what the camera manufacturers have been doing is putting this filter on there that basically blurs the image, and then in the camera they sharpen it back up again. So they're basically blurring and sharpening, and that gives us our what we think of as sharp images. They've actually been blurred on purpose. But because this is such high resolution, if you blur the image, you're probably not going to get it back so easily. And so the SR doesn't do that. It just gives you the light that hits the pixel is what gets recorded. The S version, if for someone that feels they might be in a situation where they're photographing a lot of man-made fabrics or anything with like man-made texture in there. Even I've seen online, someone sent me a link of some bird feathers that have got showing a little bit of moire. So it's a bit of a concern, but for me, I would just much rather have the sharper images. And so I think, for me, it was the R. Even the guy in the shop, when I called and said, I want a second 5D SR, he said, well, why don't you get an S, a non-R, just an S, because then you've got the one without the risk of moire. And I said, no, I don't want to risk it. I want my images to be as sharp as possible. So I've just got two identical bodies. They're actually they're 7 digits different. The serial number on my second one is only 7 digits different. So it probably came down the conveyor belt just seven cameras behind the first one.
Yeah, you got a twins there by the sound. I think so about 7 digits apart. That's a nice one. Tell you what we'll do. Martin very kindly has put some images together. Martin, can you go screen share? Let's have a look at some of these images from this camera.
Yeah.
And as I asked before, I think it would be good for the viewers to see if you could zoom in now and then. And,
sure thing.
So let me just, I think I've got to make sure here because I don't want to, if I click on you, and please remind me to click off you after you've done this because I'm frozen on your page now. Off you go.
Okay. So these are literally, I mean, from here, these are images that I've shot with the 5DS. This was literally on the first afternoon. And so if we just get rid of these sidebars.
Excuse me, I just want to say something. This is Martin Bailey, street photographer.
I wear many hats.
Carry on, sorry.
So this is at the Cocoon building in Shinjuku, and basically, I mean, if we zoom in, it's going to take a few moments to load. It's still loading, but yeah. So basically, that's the sort of detail that we're looking at, and that was shot at ISO 800. So there's a tiny bit of grain starting to come in. But what I'll do as well is, for example, I mean, this is handheld. I believe this is with the 11 to 24. This is handheld out of the municipal building in Tokyo. And if we zoom in, again, we'll need to give it a moment to just sort of load. Sure. But this is the sort of detail we're looking at. I mean, you can see all of these houses and the writing on the buildings. And I mean, when you think about it, this is like a tiny portion down there, but that's what we get when we're at 100%. I took the camera to the snow monkeys. So we've got this guy here. If we zoom in,
look at that.
That's the level. That's zooming to 1:1, but that's the sort of detail we get in there.
You can count the eyelashes.
Yeah, let me just check that we're at. Yeah, so that's going into 1:1.
How much editing are you finding you have to do with these images once they're in the Lightroom, Martin?
I'm doing very little. I mean, if we look at this, I actually don't do a lot with my wildlife work. So if you look at that, there's actually nothing done to this. I rarely do very much. I'll sometimes do a little bit of add a bit of clarity, but you know, as we go through these, we can go in, and this is a 6-month-old baby looking at his year-old brother. And again, if we zoom in, just give it a moment to load to fully res in. But here we go. For the moment, yeah. I mean, look at the amount of detail there is just crazy. You can see the pigment in the eyes, and every hair is there. So, I mean, this is really one of the reasons that I've just fallen totally in love with this camera.
Now, one thing which I can probably hear a number of viewers thinking, have you had to upgrade your computer because of this particular camera and the file sizes?
No, you know, I use this. We're looking at it right now on an iMac, and this has got one of those, what they call it, the fusion drives. So it's got an SSD. The images here are actually coming from an external Thunderbolt drive. So
right, okay.
They do take a little bit longer than usual to read in. Yeah. But like this was already resed in because I probably looked at it more recently. But yeah, I didn't have to change anything. My other computer is a 3-year-old MacBook Pro with an SSD rather than a fusion drive, and that's actually a little bit faster for displaying the images. But again, I mean, we can zoom in on these and just give you an idea of the resolution. You can give it a moment. Yeah. So I mean, this is the ferns on the other side of a pond that I was shooting. This is fun.
And what print size are you going to be able to max out at with these?
Well, if you look at the details for this one, this is actually a stitched panorama. So it's 144 megapixels.
Oh, wow.
And so if we go to, actually that wouldn't be fair. What I'll do is I'll show you a 50 point, it says 50.3. I'm not sure if it's, that's what it's coming out at.
Let me remind me to go back to that one where you got a stitched image, because I want to ask you a question on that 140 megapixel one, but carry on with this 51 for the moment.
Okay. So I've just gone to the print module, and what we can do is, for example, if I was to print this at 24 by 36, it's telling me that I could print it natively 2 by 3 foot with a bit of a border at 296 ppi. So 296 ppi is that's I would normally have to go into On One Software's Perfect Resize and increase the size to about 300 ppi before I print. But it means that my native file size, I can just print straight from Lightroom without doing any upsizing now. So yeah, with a standard photo, 300 dpi at 2x3 feet. And of course, that also means that if I did go for a larger printer, you know, the printer behind me is a 24-inch roll printer. I would love to actually move to an apartment with concrete floors so I could have the 44-inch printer. And if I did that, I could still use On One Resize and probably do 44 by, what would it be, 66 inches. And there's probably a bit more, I'm not sure. But yeah, I could do 44-inch wide prints and still get a lot of detail because there's just so much detail in the file.
Yeah, that's right. If you go back to that stitched image that you had,
yeah.
Excuse me 1 second. How did you take this image? Is it what, 3-4 different images and you've stitched them together in Photoshop, or have you an option in the camera to do a pano?
Oh no, I stitched them in Photoshop.
Okay.
It's actually I can go and show. If I go to this, what date was this? The 6/22. So if I go to my 6/22 folder, I can actually pretty quickly show you that. So if we what I do is I keep my my stitched images with a 2-star. I mean, just as a bit of a tip for your viewers, listeners, if you notice the color coding here, I only use the color labels in Lightroom for indicating panoramas. I do a green for go, and then orange proceed with care, proceed with caution, and then red to stop. And that's basically how I show myself which images are in a.
That's a good tip, that. And another thing you've done there, Martin, which I've heard said a few times, which very rarely I see being used, holding the camera portrait style to do do a pano stitching, because it gives you the depth of image then, doesn't it?
It does, yeah. I mean, you're always going to end up trimming a little bit away, and
of course, yeah.
Whenever I'm doing a pano, I go vertical and just do, you know, I actually level my tripod first. I use a tripod with a leveling base. If you don't have a leveling base, you have to make sure that the legs are all at the right length to get it level with the spirit level, and then just make sure that the camera's level with the digital level inside the camera. And then if you loosen the nut, or the knob on the ball head that allows it to rotate, you can then just pan around. And I normally do half a frame each. Actually, I mean, if you see here, you can see that the first frame is almost the same as the second one because I was just getting started. So actually, let me go through and start from the beginning here. Actually, you know what? What's happening there is they seem to not be in order.
Yeah, so I've seen that before.
Yeah, I'll go through half a frame at a time, and then I'll always go a little bit further than I think I need. You know, like say at the end here. At the end here, we can see some foliage creeping in the bottom. I knew that I was probably not going to use that much, but it just go a little bit wider and a little bit taller than you think you'll need. Yeah, and that can help. But literally, that's what resulted in a 144 megapixel
144 megapixels.
Yeah, and that can be printed huge.
Yeah, I was going to say, and also with the use of Resize, which I find is just an amazing program, how you can resize your images to larger if you want to go with that option as well.
Yes.
Yeah, I can see what's going to happen in the Martin Bailey household. You're going to be getting a concrete floor and a new printer pretty soon.
You know, I'm thinking of renting one of the ground floor apartments in this. We live in like a maisonette apartment. We have the second and the third floor. It's one house. But I believe the ground floors have concrete floors, and there's a couple of them open. I'm thinking of going to the landlord and just asking if they can rent me one of those for cheap, and just
just park an Epsom in there, yeah.
Yeah, well, I mean, what I would actually do is that I'm thinking of expanding my business in a few ways, and one of them would require more space anyway. So I'm thinking that I might have to talk to them about that. And just happen, if it does happen to have concrete floors, I'll be forced. Just
don't talk to the wife about it just yet. You know, just leave it in your head and make the conversations.
Right.
That's great, Martin. Thanks for sharing those images. If you come out of that, that'd be great. Thanks again.
You know what? Just quickly, one last thing that I've just reminded myself of. There was another concern with this resolution about the dynamic range. And DxO Mark actually say that the 5DS R has got about 2/3 more dynamic range than the 5D Mark III. But people generally tend to get all bent out of shape about dynamic range because they believe that they're plugging up their blacks. But if we just turn on this so that you can see the histogram here. If you look at the histogram, if you make sure that your data on your histogram is almost on the right side, and Lightroom gives you a little bit back, so I've actually gone slightly over in the camera. But if you make sure that all of your information is close to the right side of the histogram or touching it sometimes, then you can actually, this is all of the information that you'll see here with the, I mean, look at the bottom here. There was almost nothing at the bottom of the screen.
That's amazing.
And this is all just done in Lightroom based on this original. So there's plenty of dynamic range in the images as long as you're exposed to the right. You can pretty much, there are very few scenes where if you're exposed to the right, you can't get the whole dynamic range in one frame.
Yeah.
So
such an intriguing and a very, very important photographic tip for digital printing, exposing to the right. And I know you've done blogs and you've podcast about it. It's one of those little finite things which once you find it and you're aware of it, your images just change almost overnight. I remember talking to an old friend of mine. He said I've underexposed it as I normally do with the transparencies that I used to do in the old days. And I said, try the other way. He was dumbfounded, totally dumbfounded.
Yeah, well, of course, it's not just for printing, of course. I mean,
of course.
Yeah. Okay, sorry.
Don't worry, I was intrigued. But what I was going to say was moving on to the next subject, which really got me interested in the discussion going on, because there you were talking about the Canon, and all of a sudden you started mentioning about mirrorless, and it's like an avalanche of comment on the back of it. What are you doing? Martin Bailey switching to mirrorless. What are you buying? And all this business. Why did you think buying a mirrorless body was going to, dare I use the term, solve a problem for you?
Yeah, so the thing is the Sony A7R II, I think it was announced, and it looks like a great camera. There's a couple of reasons why I'm interested in it. One was just because I was thinking, as I mentioned earlier, my original plan was to use the 5D Mark III as a backup body, but I was already concerned that having a 50 megapixel first body and a 22 megapixel second body was going to basically play with my mind, and it was going to do my head in, as you say. So I thought, that this could be a way of carrying something around that's smaller, a little bit smaller, not a lot, but a little bit smaller than a DSLR, and give me still 40 something megapixels. That was one part of it. And the other one was really just that I actually would like to get into mirrorless to a degree, but I've got a big investment in Canon lenses. Yeah. And so it would really be, at least for the time being, would be me using a Metabones adapter with the Sony. And of course, that's kind of defeating the object because the lens is still big. And so I'm not really going to bring my package down, the whole sort of package down very far by just changing a body. So I knew that what would happen is that I would probably end up getting a couple of other Sony lenses and actually just doing some trips just with mirrorless. But, I said earlier this year when I reviewed the 11-24 that I've never been happier as being a Canon user. The 11-24 is just an amazing lens. And the 5D has just just topped it all off. So
Yeah.
as soon as I saw the quality from the images, you know, I'm not getting any younger. My backpack is usually pretty heavy, especially if I'm doing wildlife, and I've got like a 200 to 400 in there, and I've got all sorts of other stuff.
Oh.
But I think I can manage to carry it around for a few more years.
I think this is an important point you make, actually, Martin, because I'm a mirrorless user with the Fuji cameras, and I'm delighted with what the images that I get from it. I spoke to Karen Hutton a few shows back when she went through this mirrorless change, but it was a case of, as Karen said, it was getting to a point where I feel that I'm reading between the lines from what you're saying. It was time for her to make the change because of the weight that she was carrying around. And I think that's the important point for people that are like yourself, landscape photographers, nature photographers that need the bigger lens, that are very keen on the high resolution of their cameras as well. But the time will come when your body, to get to those points where you want to take these images, won't be able to cope with the weight of bag that you've got, and then that'll be the time for you to make that switch. I know Trey Ratcliffe is very much into the Sony cameras, but near on all his lenses are Zeiss lenses, are using a Metabones adapter, and he's very much into manual focusing. Now, correct me if I'm wrong, from the type of work that you're doing, I suppose you could zone focus with a third-party lens on your cameras, but that's not really what your style is.
Yeah. So with landscape work, which is what Trey predominantly does. Yeah. It's not a big deal to manually focus. I actually use manual focus for most of my landscape work because I'm often using live view anyway, and I'll go in and I'll tweak focus manually. But on the landscape photographer in me could handle mirrorless and the whole mirrorless thing, especially because it often means more walking to get to the great locations. Yeah. But the other half of Martin Bailey is a wildlife photographer, and that requires the snappiest autofocus and long lenses. And so, I mean, my 200 to 400 millimeter with the 1.4 extender built in cost me more than a small car, and more than a medium-sized car. And so I can't just give that up just from a financial decision. I can't just give that up, having only owned it for a couple of years. But the other thing is that the autofocus is still incredibly snappy with the Canon glass. And I spoke to a few people about using the Sony with the Metabones. And although there are people doing reviews saying that it's okay, okay autofocus doesn't get you great wildlife shots. No. It will get you okay wildlife shots and sports shots. But I've never been into making okay photos. I want to get the best quality that I can. And so unless Sony or someone turns up and says, Martin, we're just going to throw a few $1,000s worth of gear at you, go and play with it. Unless that happens, I really can't afford to switch because at the moment I need that snappy autofocus.
And excuse me interrupting, it would have to be a total system switch. It can't be part switch and I'll still carry on with the lenses. For you to get the benefit of that type of system, you've got to do a total switch, haven't you?
Well, I don't think you need to be. I mean, photographers tend to be binary. We want to do one or the other. And that was actually going to be my second point there, is that I would end up having to maintain two systems. And that just really financially doesn't make sense to me at the moment. So, if I'm going to maintain just one system, it has to be one that will allow me to do both my wildlife and my landscape work and any other type of photography that I do. And so at the moment, still, it's Canon. And like I say, I mean, with the latest lenses that they brought out, the 200 to 400, the new 100 to 400 that is basically hand-holdable and still got a great reach, and then the 11 to 24, it's like heaven for me. And that actually has enabled me to downsize a little bit, because the 11 to 24 has replaced the 14 millimeter prime and the 16 to 35. And so I can actually now, if I need to, I can travel with just 3 lenses, the 11 to 24, 24 to 70, and then either the 70 to 200 if I'm only doing landscape. If I need a bit more reach, I can go with the 100 to 400. And so, I mean, I've actually just...
Your spread's covered then, isn't it, for anything from 11 to 400 mil?
Right.
Is that the one with the 2 times converter on?
It is, yeah.
Yeah.
So I've actually just got a new, it doesn't look very small in the frame here, but I've actually just got an 18-litre Gura Gear Butterfly bag.
Yes.
The smallest camera bag I've had in years. But I can do both my Namibia and Iceland trip with this bag now. So, I am actually being able to downsize to a degree just by the new lenses that Canon's brought out. So yeah. I'm in a good place with Canon still. So
yeah, that's good. Well, it's good. Yeah, I'm firm believer it's horses for courses. I'm not saying mirrorless is better than DSLRs. I prefer to walk around with a Fuji X100S when I'm doing my street photography, and I've also got the latest XD10 now with the 35 and the 18-55 lenses for that camera body. So, and that suits my style. And I'm not a professional photographer by any stretch of the imagination. So
you know what? I think the thing is though, and this is one of the reasons why I was interested in the Sony, is because I do want to get into a mirrorless system. And yes. It's really just looking for the one that's going to push me over the edge.
Yeah.
I'm definitely not thinking that I'm getting any better images. I mean, the resolution with the 5DS is game changing, but
sure,
you can get 40 megapixels with the 5DSR, and sorry, with the Sony A7R too. And so they're there for the majority of photography. They're great systems, and downsizing, everything's less. I mean, I get people coming on workshops now with bags like this, and it's like, and they've still got all of the lenses they need to work with. That's a very enticing thought. It's tempting, but there's a few reasons really why it's not for me just yet. But it's going to happen at some point. It's inevitable.
Yeah, I think. Well, I suppose the $64,000 question is when Canon make a mirrorless camera, which will adapt to the lenses which you've got, and then of course, if it's giving you the same resolution of work that your 5DSR is, then job's done. Away you go. They're out, and then bring the mirrorless, and hopefully then you start reducing the size down. I think the problem also, in addition to that, though. With these, the only system which has got anywhere near a stable of lenses, which is in a situation to compete, dare I use that term, with Nikon and with Canon, is the 4/3 system. But then, of course, that changes your dynamics totally in terms of resolution, size of image. And then you've got the 1.5 crop Fujis, and then obviously the 1.5 crop Sonys as well. Sony and Fuji both basically are building up their stable of lenses, and until they've got a depth of lens, then I think the likes of yourself and the other top landscape photographers, that's when that system will start probably gaining some momentum, and those guys will switch over.
Yeah, the other thing, of course, is weatherproofing. I believe Olympus has some weatherproof lenses.
Yes, they do, yeah.
So. I mean, there's great gear out there.
It's superb gear. There's a Fuji weatherproof Fuji XT1.
Yeah, and so it's like I say, it's really just a matter of time. I think it's all good stuff.
and then Canon bring out a 60, a 70, and an 80 megapixel, and you'll be punching that iPhone for the order.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't think that 50 was going to be this sharp. I thought it was going to start to punish the lenses. And so, they've surprised me with this. Maybe they can go higher and the lenses will work with it. Maybe it wasn't the resolution of the glass as much as it was the, getting the quietening down the movement of the shutter and a few other things like that. Yeah. I'm looking forward to that one.
Yeah, I bet you are. And obviously you're looking forward to using your camera more when you get out in your workshops, and obviously your own personal project. Martin, thank you so much for joining me today.
Not at all.
It's been great to hear about your film experiences with the new old Yashica, and obviously with your new baby, the Canon 5D which is great. I'm going to put all the links in the blog for your comments that you made on that camera, and obviously your Yashica experiences. And suffice for me to say thanks for joining me. And for anyone shooting out there this weekend, yep, that's right. Well, Martin won't, but leave your camera at home. Bye for now.